Hey everyone, Travis Paige here. Did you know that a creekfront property can flood from a heavy rain event while a bayfront property may barely see any water at all, or that a beachfront home that handles normal rain just fine may have a lot of water during a hurricane? One of the biggest misconceptions I hear from waterfront buyers is that all water property floods the same way. The truth is, a creek, river, bay, and beachfront property can all flood for completely different reasons. Before we jump into that, let me quickly introduce myself if you don't know me. My name is Travis Paige with Better Homes and Gardens Expect Realty. I've spent over 20 years helping buyers and sellers on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Before becoming a realtor, I worked in home inspections, residential construction, pool installations, and other areas of the housing industry. I've also spent most of my life living, working, hunting, fishing, and boating on the water right here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe and leave a comment and let me know if there's anything I could add to help others out to deal with flooding or other resources for the housing industry. I've owned and spent time on different types of waterfront property, including bayfront property, river property, creek property, hunting property, and I've personally experienced flooding in all the environments. What I've learned over the years is that if you love living on the water the way I do, flooding is something you learn to understand, prepare for, and manage. You learn what weather conditions get your attention. You learn when it's time to move equipment. You learn which forecasts matter. And you learn that preparation is everything. In fact, this past week, we experienced one of the best examples I've ever seen how different waterfront properties can respond to the exact same weather event. So let's talk about the difference between creekfront, riverfront, bayfront, and beachfront properties and what every waterfront buyer should know before purchasing. Let's start with the creekfront property. Creeks are some of the most beautiful places you'll find. They often are quiet, loaded with wildlife. They make great locations for camps and homes, recreational areas. But creeks can also react very differently, very quickly to rainfall. When heavy rain falls upstream, all of that water eventually works its way into the creek system. The important thing to understand is that it doesn't necessarily have to rain on your property or near your property for your property to flood. It may rain 20, 30, or even 50 miles north of you or away. That water can still end up flowing through your creek. When enough rain falls over a large watershed, those creeks rise rapidly and overflow their banks. Now let's talk about rivers. Rivers operate very similar, but on a much larger scale. A river is collecting water from even a larger drainage area. It may be most of the state or a good portion of the state. One thing that surprises many people is that a river can continue rising long after the rain has stopped because water is still moving downstream from areas all over upstream. River flooding often lasts longer than creek flooding and can impact much larger areas. Now let's move to bayfront property. This is where many people get surprised. Heavy rain and flash flooding often have very little effect on bayfront property compared to creekfront or riverfront property. Why? Because a bay is a much larger body of water. When several inches of rain fall directly into a bay, it usually doesn't cause a significant rise in water level because there's just simply so much volume of water there already. Most flooding concerns on bayfront property come from storm surge, prolonged onshore winds, high tides, tropical storms, and hurricanes. The water is being pushed towards the shore rather than simply flowing downhill from rainfall. Beachfront property is very similar. Beachfront homes are often directly exposed to the Gulf of America. During tropical systems, they can experience storm surge, wave action, beach erosion, wind-driven water. In many situations, a beachfront property might experience minimal effects from a tropical heavy rain event, but can significantly be more at risk during a hurricane. So while creek flooding is often driven by rainfall, bay and beachfront flooding are often driven by storm surge or coastal weather conditions. And that brings me to a real-world example from this past week. We recently had a tropical depression move through our area. Some locations experienced winds, maybe gusts of over 70 miles an hour. Normally, when people hear tropical systems, they immediately think about storm surge. But in this case, surge was relatively minor. Around my bayou property, I only saw a little water in the yard, nothing unusual, very little trash, no damage. However, my hunting camp on the creek, about 30 miles north of here, it experienced the worst flooding I've ever seen. Most of the old timers there said it was the highest ever. The reason was simple. This wasn't really a storm surge event. It was a rainfall event. Many areas around us received over 10 inches of rain in a day to 2 day period. But it wasn't just our local area. Places 30 to 60 miles north of us, they also received tremendous amounts of rainfall. All of that water eventually followed the tributaries, creeks, the bayous, river systems, all downstream. The creeks reached levels that I've never personally witnessed before. One thing that really got my attention was when I learned that a major highway about 10 minutes, well, probably about 10 miles from my property, as a crow flies, had been closed for flooding. They shut the highway down. I knew right then the water was headed towards my camp. I immediately went to the property and started moving equipment, the vehicles, trailers, four-wheeler ATVs, equipment, anything I thought I could save. And fortunately, I was able to move quite a bit of it. But what shocked me was how fast the water was rising. We were watching the water come up about, I don't know, probably 6 inches every 30 to 60 minutes. We kept marking it, watching it grow while we were there. Think about that. That's not 6 inches over a day. That's 6 inches in less than an hour. Once the water starts rising at that rate, time becomes your most valuable asset. I probably only had a couple hours between the time I arrived until when the major flooding event actually occurred. That experience reinforced something I've learned over the years. Don't wait until the water is in your yard to start preparing. By then, you may already be behind. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had a flood experience? What's something you've learned from it? One of the most important things waterfront owners can do is pay attention to what's happening beyond their property. Watch the weather, watch rainfall totals, pay attention to road closures, pay attention to what's happening upstream. The flood that actually affects your property tomorrow may have actually started many miles away. One tool that I highly recommend learning about is the NOAA flood forecasting system. NOAA maintains flood gauges and river gauges throughout the country. They provide real-time information. You can see the current, the river levels, flood stages, historical crest, and forecasted water levels. That's big help for sure. These forecasts can give you valuable time to prepare. Instead of guessing, you can monitor the actual conditions developing throughout the watershed. If you own property on a creek, river, or bayou, I highly recommend becoming familiar with the nearest NOAA gauge locations and learning how to read the forecast and how it reacts with the creek or waterfront area. Those gauges can often tell you what's coming before you ever see the water on your property. Another thing I always encourage waterfront owners to think about is elevation. Elevation matters big time here. Flood zones matter. Base flood elevation matters. When you're considering waterfront property, you should understand that flood zone, look at the elevation certificates when available. Learn the history of the property. Two homes sitting side by side can have very different flood risks simply because of elevation differences. If one house is built higher than the other. And when the storms are approaching, don't just think about protecting the house. Think about everything outside, everything that's under the house or in the yard. Move the vehicles, move the campers, move the boats, move the tractors, trailers, golf carts, ATVs. Move anything that would be difficult or expensive to replace. The key is moving those items before the roads become inaccessible. Because once water starts crossing the roads, filling low areas, your options disappear quickly. Now, after hearing all of this, some people may think waterfront living sounds like a headache. For me, it's exactly the opposite. I love living on the water. I love boating. I love fishing. I love the wildlife. I love the views. Look at that. It's beautiful. I love the lifestyle. The goal isn't to avoid water. The goal is to understand it, respect it, prepare for it, and learn from it. If you do that, waterfront living can be one of the most rewarding lifestyles there is. Whether you're looking at a creekfront camp, a river house, a bayfront home, or even a beachfront property, understanding how each type of waterfront property responds to the weather can help you make better decisions and avoid costly surprises. Are you going to save everything? Not all the time. If you're considering buying waterfront property on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and have questions about flood zones, elevation, insurance, waterfront living, feel free to reach out. Please make sure you let me know what you think of this kind of information and any video ideas you have or you would like to see. I'm Travis Paige with Better Homes and Gardens Expect Realty, and I'll see you in the next video.